The terminal buzzed with the sounds of rolling luggage, distant chatter, and the faint hum of flight announcements overhead. Denver International Airport was alive with the controlled chaos of travelers racing against time, clutching boarding passes and overpriced coffees. Officer Alexandra Morgan adjusted her K-9 partner Rex's harness as they moved through Gate 23. Rex, a lean and alert Belgian Malinois, walked in perfect rhythm beside her, ears perked, amber eyes sharp. "All right, Rex," Alexandra murmured under her breath, her fingers grazing the silver badge on her chest. "Routine patrol. No surprises today, okay? But surprises rarely ask permission." As they passed a row of vending machines tucked against a steel gray wall, Rex stopped abruptly. His muscular body went rigid, nose twitching as if an invisible thread had snapped tight around him. Then, without warning, he let out a sharp bark, one that cut through the background noise like glass shattering on marble. "Rex, heel!" Alexandra commanded, but Rex was locked in place, his eyes fixed on the vending machine in front of him. He barked again, louder this time, the sound reverberating through the terminal. Passengers turned, brows furrowed in curiosity and irritation. A mother pulled her child closer, a TSA agent nearby shifted nervously. Alexandra crouched beside Rex, her hand firmly on his harness. "What is it, buddy? What do you smell?" Rex growled low, his nose pressed against the thin seam along the side of the vending machine. He pawed at the base, his claws scraping against the metal panel. Alexandra's stomach tightened. She'd worked with Rex for nearly 4 years now, and she knew his signals better than anyone. This wasn't a false alarm or a distraction. Something was seriously wrong. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" A uniformed airport security guard approached, his voice uncertain. He was young, probably new to the job, his posture betraying his nervousness as he eyed Rex warily. "No," Alexandra said, standing tall. "Something's wrong here. Get maintenance down here now." The guard hesitated, glancing at the vending machine, then back at Alexandra. "It's just a snack machine, officer." Rex barked again, almost as if he could sense the dismissal in the guard's tone. His tail was stiff, hackles raised along his spine. "It's not just a snack machine," Alexandra said, her voice cutting through the man's hesitation. Her hand instinctively moved toward her sidearm, though she didn't draw it. "Call maintenance now." The guard's eyes widened at her tone, and he quickly reached for his radio. Alexandra turned her attention back to Rex, who hadn't moved an inch, his focus entirely on the vending machine. She'd seen him react to drugs before, to explosives, even to human remains during a search and rescue operation after a building collapsed last year. But this was different. There was an urgency to his behavior that sent chills down her spine. 15 minutes later, a tired-looking maintenance worker in a neon vest arrived, toolbox in hand. His reluctance was obvious as he began unscrewing the vending machine side panel. The tension in the air felt like a taut wire about to snap. Alexandra kept a hand on Rex's harness, her other resting lightly on the sidearm holstered at her hip. Okay, the worker muttered. The final screw clattered to the floor, and he pried the panel loose. The smell hit them first. Stale air, sweat, something sickly sweet. Alexandra's breath caught in her throat as the hidden compartment inside the vending machine was revealed. Curled in the small, dark space was a child, a little girl no older than 4. Her face was streaked with tears, her cheeks sunken from dehydration. Big brown eyes blinked slowly at the sudden light, as if she wasn't sure if this was reality or another nightmare. "Oh my God," the guard whispered behind Alexandra. The girl whimpered softly, flinching as the maintenance worker stepped back, his face pale. Alexandra dropped to her knees, her voice soft, gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. We've got you." Rex lowered himself to the ground, his ears flat, his tail sweeping gently across the tile floor. Slowly, the girl reached out a trembling hand, her tiny fingers brushing Rex's fur. "She's alive," Alexandra said, barely above a whisper, before turning back to the guard. "Get EMS here now and lock down this gate. No one leaves until we figure out how this happened." The terminal was no longer a place of idle chatter and travel plans. It was silent, save for the occasional distant beep of airport equipment and the soft murmurs of passengers being redirected away from Gate 23. The vending machine, now surrounded by police tape, stood like a grotesque monument to something far darker than anyone wanted to admit. Alexandra stood with Rex a few feet away, watching as paramedics carefully carried the child out on a stretcher. Her small hand clutched a stuffed bear someone had given her, her eyes never leaving Rex. "She wouldn't have been found if it weren't for you," Alexandra said softly, crouching to meet Rex's steady gaze. She rubbed behind his ears, her throat tight. "Good boy, you're a damn good boy." Rex's tail gave a faint wag, but his eyes remained fixed on the vending machine. He let out a low whine, almost as if he was trying to tell Alexandra something. His nose twitched, and then he turned his head slightly toward another vending machine across the gate. Alexandra's heart stopped for just a moment. "Rex," she began, her voice almost a plea. But Rex was already on his feet, body tense, nose pointed toward the second machine. The realization hit Alexandra like a freight train. If there was one child, could there be more? "Get maintenance back here," Alexandra shouted, already pulling Rex with her toward the second machine. Behind her, the airport staff scrambled into action, the maintenance worker fumbling with his radio, passengers whispering in growing panic. Rex was already barking again, sharp, urgent, undeniable. Alexandra's hand hovered over her holstered weapon as she stared at the second vending machine. The world seemed to narrow to just that rectangle of glass and steel, and the faint possibility of another life hidden just out of sight. The fluorescent lights of the terminal cast a sterile glow on Alexandra's face as she stood rigid in front of the second vending machine. Rex's muscles tensed beneath his coat. He growled low and steady, his nose pressed firmly against the glass. Around them, airport security scrambled. Maintenance workers fumbled with their tools and passengers clutched their bags tighter, their faces etched with fear and confusion. "Open it now," Alexandra said, her voice sharp and leaving no room for argument. The same maintenance worker from earlier fumbled with his screwdriver, his hands trembling. I'm going as fast as I can," Rex barked, a sharp, commanding sound that seemed to shake the air. Alexandra reached down, her hand brushing the fur on his back, her touch grounding them both. She could feel his heartbeat steady and sure beneath her palm. The panel finally gave way with a screech of metal against metal. Alexandra leaned forward, her stomach churning with anticipation, but this time the compartment was empty. Nothing. Just dark space, crumpled wrappers, and an overwhelming scent of something stale and chemical. Rex didn't move, though his nose twitched and his body remained locked in that same stiff posture. Alexandra felt it too. Something was off. There was no way he would have reacted so intensely without reason. "Officer Morgan," a voice called behind her, and she turned to see Agent Nathan Reeves from the FBI approaching. Mid-30s, sharp suit and sharper eyes. He flashed his badge as he approached, glancing briefly at Rex before meeting Alexandra's gaze. "We've secured the first child. She's on her way to the hospital," Reeves said. "But I need you to step back. This is a federal investigation now." Alexandra bristled slightly at his tone. She'd encountered federal agents before, who viewed local law enforcement as little more than obstacles to be moved aside. But there was something in Reeves's eyes, a focused intensity, a quiet respect, that made her pause. "With all due respect, Agent Reeves, my K-9 isn't wrong," Alexandra said, standing her ground. "He reacted to this machine for a reason." Reeves hesitated, glancing between the empty compartment and the dog still growling softly. There was a moment of silent assessment, his eyes taking in Rex's rigid posture, the unwavering focus in the dog's amber gaze. "All right," he said finally, "but let's be smart about this. Get a forensic team in here. We're not letting this terminal turn into a circus." Alexandra nodded, grateful for his willingness to listen. Too many times in her career, she'd seen Rex's instincts dismissed by those who didn't understand the depth of a working dog's abilities. But there was something about the way Reeves looked at Rex, a recognition, perhaps, of a fellow professional, that told her this time might be different. Hours later, the terminal was sectioned off with barriers and police tape. Alexandra sat on the floor beside Rex, her back against the cold metal wall. The vending machines were surrounded by technicians in blue gloves, their tools clinking and murmurs rising softly into the still air. Rex had finally settled, though his head rested on his paw, eyes still fixed on the second machine. Officer Morgan, Agent Reeves approached, crouching down to meet her at eye level. His face was grim, lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. "We found something." Alexandra's breath caught. "What is it?" Reeves glanced at Rex. "Your partner was right. There's a faint scent trail, chemicals, human sweat, traces of something wrong. Whoever's been using these machines to smuggle children, they've been careful, but not careful enough." Alexandra nodded, her throat tight. "So there were more?" "We think so. We flagged vending machines in 3 other airports with similar signs. But it's bigger than that." Reeves handed her a tablet showing a digital map dotted with red marks across the country. "These machines are a part of a trafficking route. Denver was just a node in the chain." The air felt heavy around Alexandra, pressing against her chest. Rex shifted beside her, his tail giving one slow wag before resting still again. The implications were staggering. Not just one child, not just one machine, but an entire network dedicated to moving children like cargo across the country. What's our next move?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. Reeves stood, offering her a hand up. "First, we brief the team. Then if you and Rex are up for it, I'd like you both to join the task force. We need his nose and your experience." Alexandra took his hand, rising to her feet. Rex stood with her, pressing close to her leg, a silent affirmation of his readiness. "We're in, sir," she said simply. The command center had been hastily set up in a nearby conference room. Monitors glowed with live feeds from security cameras, maps filled with red pins, and flight logs scrolling in real time. Alexandra stood at the edge of the room, watching agents move with frantic precision. Rex sat at her feet, his ears perked forward, taking in every movement, every sound. "This isn't a local operation," Reeves said, pacing in front of the map. "It's coordinated. Someone on the inside is feeding them information. Baggage schedules, maintenance access, security blind spots, and they're doing it right under our noses." Alexandra's jaw clenched. "How do we stop it?" Before Reeves could answer, a voice crackled over the radio. "Agent Reeves, we've got something. A report from an airport in Dallas. Another vending machine anomaly." Static interrupted the rest of the transmission, but Alexandra caught one word: child. "We can't wait," Alexandra said, stepping forward. Her heart raced at the thought of another child trapped in darkness, scared and alone. "Every second counts. We have to assume there are more children out there right now, scared, alone, and running out of time." Reeves hesitated. "You're right, but we can't go charging in blindly, Alexandra. We need to—" Rex barked once, twice, a sharp, urgent sound that silenced the room. Everyone turned to look at the dog. His head was raised, ears pointed forward, nose twitching again. Alexandra's chest tightened. "Rex smells something." The command center went still. Alexandra followed Rex's lead as he moved toward a maintenance access door at the far end of the conference room. He sniffed the crack along the floor and let out a deep growl. "Open it," Alexandra said, her hand moving to her sidearm. An agent hesitated. "That leads to the underground service tunnels." "Then that's where we're going," Alexandra replied, her voice leaving no room for argument. Reeves nodded to the agent, who quickly unlocked the door. The smell that wafted out was damp and musty, tinged with something else, something human. "I'll take point," Reeves said, drawing his weapon. "You and Rex follow. The rest of you, secure the perimeter and wait for my signal." The tunnel was dark, damp, and filled with the faint hum of machinery overhead. The air smelled of mildew, metal, and something sharper, something human. Rex led the way, his paws clicking softly against the concrete floor. Alexandra walked close behind him, her flashlight cutting a narrow beam of light through the darkness. Behind her, Agent Reeves followed, his firearm drawn. "Do you smell that?" Alexandra whispered. Reeves nodded. "Ammonia, Sweat." They turned a corner, and Rex froze. His tail was stiff, his ears locked forward. Ahead of them, faint light spilled from an open doorway. The sound of soft crying echoed through the corridor. Alexandra's pulse hammered in her ears. She crouched beside Rex, her hand on his back. "Easy, buddy, we've got this." They moved forward slowly, silently. Alexandra's heart ached with every muffled sob she heard inside the room. She could make out the shapes of two vending machines, their panels removed and small figures, children huddled in fear. A shadow shifted in the corner, and Alexandra caught the glint of a gun barrel. "Drop it!" she shouted. The man spun, his weapon raising, but Rex lunged before he could fire. The dog's growl was thunderous as he collided with the man, teeth sinking into his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Alexandra rushed forward, securing the weapon and restraining the man, while Reeves moved to comfort the children. "It's okay," Alexandra said softly as she approached the trembling kids. "You're safe now." Rex released the man, stepping back to Alexandra's side, his chest heaving, but his eyes locked on the children. In that moment, Alexandra realized the weight of what Rex had uncovered, the dark network they had stumbled upon, the lives saved because one dog refused to walk away from a vending machine. But deep down, she also knew this wasn't over. The fluorescent lights of the underground service tunnel flickered as Alexandra leaned against the cold concrete wall, her breath uneven. Rex sat at her feet, his amber eyes locked on her face, ears perked, but his body visibly tired. Behind them, Agent Reeves was coordinating with teams upstairs, arranging for the children they'd found to be taken to safety. The air was thick with a cocktail of sweat, mildew, and something else. Something darker that clung to Alexandra's clothes and skin. But the faint sound of children's voices murmuring reassurances to one another in the background reminded her why they were there. "Good boy, Rex," Alexandra whispered, her voice hoarse. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached down to scratch behind his ears. Rex leaned into her touch, his tail giving a faint wag despite the exhaustion in his posture. She could feel the warmth of his body against her leg, a solid presence in the midst of chaos. Agent Reeves approached, his expression grave. "The kids are being transported to the hospital. They're shaken up, malnourished, but they'll recover physically." Psychologically, he let the words hang in the air. Alexandra exhaled through her nose, her eyes focused on a crack in the concrete floor. The image of the first little girl they'd found, eyes wide with fear and confusion, haunted her. How long had she been in that dark, cramped space? What had she endured before Rex found her? "And the suspect?" Alexandra asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Reeves crossed his arms, his jaw tight. "He's not talking, but the documents we found in his bag, along with encrypted messages on his phone, confirm it. This is a trafficking network, and it's bigger than we thought. The vending machines are just the tip of the iceberg." Alexandra pushed away from the wall, her spine straightening as if her body remembered the weight of duty. "So what now?" Reeves's eyes flickered to Rex, then back to Alexandra. There was a moment of silent assessment, a weighing of options. "For now, you and Rex need rest. You've done more than enough," he said, his voice softening slightly. But Alexandra shook her head, her voice firm. "No, we're not done. There are more kids out there, Reeves. Every minute we waste is another minute they're trapped in some dark hole, waiting for someone to find them." Reeves sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "I knew you'd say that," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before fading quickly. "But before we move forward, there's something you need to deal with first." The police K-9 unit training facility was a 2-hour drive outside Denver, tucked away in a quiet, forested corner of Colorado. Alexandra stood by the chain-link fence, watching as Rex bounded across the training yard, his energy seemingly renewed after hours of sleep in the back of her SUV. His black and tan coat gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his sharp eyes scanned every corner of the yard. Officer Michael Ramirez, an older handler with salt and pepper hair and a steady gaze, leaned against the fence beside her. He'd been training K-9 officers for over 20 years, and he'd been the one to pair Alexandra with Rex when she first joined the unit. There was no one who understood working dogs better, no one whose opinion she valued more when it came to Rex. "You know, Alexandra, not every handler can keep up with a dog like Rex," Ramirez said, his voice carrying the slight accent of his Mexican heritage. Alexandra smirked faintly. "And not every handler gets a partner like him." They watched in silence as Rex caught a training dummy midair with pinpoint accuracy, his jaw locking around it before trotting proudly back to his handler. Ramirez's voice softened. "You've got that look again, the one you had after the Henderson case." Alexandra flinched slightly at the name. The Henderson case, a failed hostage rescue 2 years ago. She'd been part of the SWAT team. Rex had been there too, but they hadn't been able to save the child that day. It was the first and only time Rex had hesitated. The memory of it still woke her in the middle of the night sometimes. The sound of gunfire, the smell of cordite, the weight of failure pressing down on her chest. "I keep thinking," Alexandra began, but stopped herself, her hand clenched around the cold metal fence. "What if we miss something? What if there's another vending machine somewhere with another kid waiting, scared, running out of time?" Ramirez nodded slowly. His weathered face showed the lines of someone who had carried similar burdens for many years. "Alexandra, you and Rex have already saved lives, but if you're going to keep going, you can't carry every ghost with you." She turned to face him, her eyes sharp and determined. "I'm not stopping, Michael. I'm not leaving those kids out there." Ramirez looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Then trust him, Alexandra. Trust Rex. He hasn't let you down yet." That evening, back in her small apartment overlooking the Denver skyline, Alexandra sat on the floor with Rex sprawled beside her. His head rested on her lap, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his eyes still watching her every move. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting golden light over framed photos of Alexandra and Rex at various milestones. His graduation from K-9 school, their first big case, their commendation ceremony after a successful rescue operation. "Do you remember Henderson, buddy?" Alexandra's voice was barely above a whisper. "You froze, and I didn't know if I'd ever get you back after that." Rex's ears flicked slightly, as if he recognized the name. Alexandra rubbed the fur between his ears, her touch gentle. "But you came back to me, Max. You always come back." The Henderson case had nearly broken them both. A child hostage situation gone wrong, a split-second decision that ended in tragedy. Rex had found the child too late, and the trauma of it had affected him deeply. For weeks afterward, he'd been hesitant during training, his usual confidence shattered. Alexandra had feared he might never return to duty. But slowly, patiently, they had rebuilt that trust, that bond, day by day, training session by training session, until Rex was once again the fearless, focused partner she relied on. The experience had changed them both, making them more cautious but also more determined to never fail again. For a moment it felt as if time froze. The bond between them was a lifeline, unspoken, unbreakable. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the silence. She grabbed it, her stomach tightening when she saw the caller ID, Agent Reeves. "Alexandra," Reeves's voice was sharp, urgent. "We've tracked another vending machine anomaly. This one's in a freight terminal outside Dallas. It's active." Alexandra felt her pulse quicken. "Active as in someone's there right now?" "Yes, and Alexandra, this isn't just another node. We think this might be their main distribution point." Alexandra didn't hesitate. "We'll be there." She hung up and looked down at Rex. He was already sitting up, ears pricked forward, tail slightly wagging as if he knew. Despite his exhaustion, despite everything they'd been through, he was ready. "Looks like we're not done yet, partner," Alexandra said softly. Rex let out a quiet bark, his amber eyes locked onto hers with unshakable trust. The next morning, Alexandra and Rex boarded a small private plane chartered by the FBI. The engines roared as the aircraft climbed into the sky, the city of Denver shrinking below them. Alexandra leaned back in her seat, one hand resting on Rex's harness. Agent Reeves sat across from her, flipping through a stack of files. "We'll land at a private airstrip just outside Dallas. Our teams are already in place," Reeves explained, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. "Based on the intelligence we've gathered, this freight terminal is a major hub in their operation. They use it to redistribute the children to various locations across the country." Alexandra nodded, her gaze steady. "We'll finish this." Rex's head rested against her knee, his eyes closing briefly as the hum of the engines filled the cabin. But Alexandra could feel it, the quiet readiness in his body, the anticipation that matched her own. They were heading straight into the heart of darkness, but this time Alexandra wasn't afraid, because Rex was by her side, and together they would find every last child hidden behind every last vending machine. The freight terminal outside Dallas was a sprawling labyrinth of warehouses, loading docks, and endless rows of stacked shipping containers. The night sky was a blanket of black, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. Floodlights painted harsh white patches across the concrete ground, throwing long, sharp shadows. The air buzzed with the distant hum of diesel engines and the metallic clang of cargo being moved. Alexandra adjusted Rex's harness, her gloved hand brushing against his fur. He was tense, his body coiled like a spring, every muscle primed for action. Agent Reeves stood nearby, his earpiece crackling with updates from the tactical teams positioned around the perimeter. "This is it," Reeves said, his voice low but steady. "Our informant confirmed it. This warehouse is a central hub. The traffickers use vending machines disguised as standard cargo shipments. They're here tonight, moving another batch." Alexandra's stomach turned at the word batch, like the children were cargo, disposable, replaceable. She thought of the little girl they'd found in Denver, how small she had looked curled inside that dark space, how her eyes had lit up with a mixture of fear and hope when Rex approached her. "Rex knows what to do," she said firmly, looking down at her partner. His amber eyes glinted in the faint light, locked onto the warehouse ahead. "We go in quiet. Rex leads." Reeves nodded, his face grim. "Let's move." Inside the warehouse was cavernous, its high ceilings disappearing into shadow. Crates were stacked in chaotic rows, each one labeled with cryptic serial numbers. The air was thick with the smell of machine oil, damp cardboard, and something faintly metallic. The distant sound of muffled voices echoed through the darkness. Rex's nose twitched and he moved forward with purpose, his paws silent on the concrete floor. Alexandra followed close behind, her sidearm drawn, her heart hammering in her chest. Reeves shadowed them, his weapon raised, eyes darting between the aisles. Suddenly, Rex stopped dead in his tracks, his head snapped to the right, his body low, slinking into a stalking stance. His growl, a low rumbling sound that vibrated through Alexandra's boots, was barely audible, but unmistakable. Alexandra signaled Reeves with a hand gesture, and they moved toward the source of Rex's focus. Around the corner they saw it, a row of vending machines still wrapped in industrial plastic, lined against a wall like silent sentinels. Their dull glass fronts reflected the harsh overhead lights. But it wasn't the machines themselves that made Alexandra's breath hitch. It was the faint rhythmic tapping coming from one of them, like tiny knuckles against glass. "There's someone in there," Alexandra whispered. Reeves spoke softly into his radio. "We've located the machines, moving into secure." Alexandra moved forward slowly, keeping her steps light. Rex stayed at her side, his ears flat against his head. As they approached the nearest machine, Alexandra could see it, a pair of tiny eyes wide with fear, staring back at her through the narrow seam of the hidden compartment. "It's okay," Alexandra whispered, kneeling down so she was eye level with the glass. "We're here to help." The child inside couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Their face was pale, lips trembling. Rex nudged Alexandra's arm, his gaze flicking to the shadows above. A noise, soft but deliberate, echoed from the upper walkway. Alexandra's head snapped up just in time to see a figure dart between crates on the mezzanine level. "They know we're here," Reeves hissed. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from above, bullets ricocheting off metal crates. Alexandra ducked behind the vending machines, her arm wrapping around Rex to shield him as sparks flew overhead. "Cover fire," Reeves shouted into his radio. "We've got hostiles." Rex barked sharply, pulling against Alexandra's hold, his instincts screaming to pursue. Alexandra met his eyes and nodded. "Go, Rex! Find them!" Rex bolted across the warehouse floor, his lean body weaving between crates with unmatched precision. Alexandra rose from her cover, firing 2 rounds toward the walkway above. A figure crumpled and fell from the railing with a sickening thud. Reeves gestured to Alexandra. "Secure the kids. I'll cover Rex." Alexandra's hands trembled slightly as she pried open the compartment of the vending machine. The child inside flinched as the panel gave way, but Alexandra spoke softly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Come on, let's get you out of here." She reached in, her fingers brushing against small, trembling hands. The child was light as a feather as Alexandra lifted them out, holding them close against her chest. "I've got you." Behind her, more vending machines were being opened by tactical officers, each revealing more frightened children, some silent, others sobbing softly. The horrific efficiency of the operation made Alexandra's stomach churn. "Alexandra," Reeves's voice cracked over the radio. "Rex has found something. You need to see this." Alexandra handed the child to a waiting paramedic and followed Reeves's signal through the maze of crates. At the far end of the warehouse, Rex was standing in front of a heavy steel door. His growls were deep, continuous, his entire body rigid with tension. His claws scraped at the floor as he shifted, his teeth bared. "What is it, buddy?" Alexandra whispered. Reeves caught up, panting slightly. "We found blueprints in one of the crates. That door leads to an underground loading bay. It's their exit route." "Is it locked?" Alexandra asked. Reeves nodded. "And reinforced. We'd need explosives to get through." Rex barked, short, sharp, impatient. His entire focus was on the door, as if he could sense what or who was behind it. "Or," Alexandra said softly, crouching next to her partner. "We trust him." She removed Rex's leash, her hand stroking his back. "Go, Rex, find them!" Rex lunged at the door with surprising force, his jaws snapping around the handle, his paws scrambling against the concrete floor. After a moment, they heard a faint click as the latch gave way. The door creaked open into darkness. Reeves flicked on his flashlight, revealing a dimly lit tunnel filled with the sound of running footsteps. Voices shouted in the distance, panicked, desperate. "They're running," Alexandra said, her voice cold. Rex bolted into the tunnel, Alexandra and Reeves close behind. The chase was frantic. Footsteps echoed off the tunnel walls as they closed in on the traffickers. Rex surged ahead, his bark sharp and furious. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, catching glimpses of retreating figures. Finally, Rex lunged, tackling a man to the ground. Alexandra and Reeves caught up just as Rex's teeth sank into the man's arm, preventing him from reaching for a concealed weapon. "It's over!" Alexandra shouted, her gun aimed at the remaining figures, who froze in place, hands raised. The sound of approaching sirens filled the tunnel, bouncing off the cold stone walls. Alexandra holstered her weapon and knelt beside Rex, her hand resting on his side. "Good boy, Rex, you did it." The traffickers were cuffed. The remaining children were found in nearby crates, and the tunnels were sealed. As Alexandra sat on the cold tunnel floor, Rex curled beside her, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. But in his amber eyes, there was something unshakable: trust, loyalty, and a quiet victory. The weight of their work still hung heavy, but for now they had saved lives, and sometimes Alexandra realized, that's enough. The faint orange glow of dawn crept over the Dallas freight terminal, casting long shadows over the aftermath of the operation. Tactical teams moved through the wreckage of crates and vending machines, marking evidence and cataloging every horrific detail of the trafficking network they'd uncovered. The children, wrapped in emergency blankets, were being loaded carefully into ambulances by medics with hushed reassurances and gentle touches. Alexandra sat on the steps of a cargo container. Rex sprawled at her feet. His chest rose and fell in slow, heavy breaths, his body still trembling with exhaustion from the long pursuit through the tunnels. She rested a hand on his back, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall beneath her palm, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos around them. Agent Reeves approached, a folder tucked under his arm, his face etched with fatigue. "We've rounded up everyone we could find down there. 15 traffickers in total, Alexandra, and 23 kids." 23, Alexandra exhaled, her eyes flicking toward the horizon. Each number represented a child who would never be the same, whose innocence had been stolen, whose trust had been shattered, but also a child who now had a chance, a future, a life beyond the darkness of those vending machines. But it's not all of them, is it? She asked, already knowing the answer. Reeves hesitated, his lips pressed into a thin line. No, the man Rex tackled, he wasn't the one calling the shots. There's someone else, someone higher up, and they're still out there. Rex's ears twitched at Reeves's voice, his head lifting slightly, his amber eyes locked onto Alexandra, as if he could sense the weight of the conversation. Then we're not done, Alexandra said firmly, her spine straightening as she stood. Not yet. The FBI's temporary command center buzzed with frenetic energy. Rows of monitors displayed live feeds from security cameras, aerial drone views, and hastily assembled maps of trafficking routes crisscrossing the country. Alexandra stood beside Reeves, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as they reviewed the evidence. We intercepted a message from one of the traffickers' phones, Reeves explained, pointing at a monitor. They were preparing for a final shipment, one last transfer before they scatter completely. And Alexandra, he hesitated before continuing. The drop point is here in Dallas tonight. Alexandra's brow furrowed. They're still here. Reeves nodded. We think they're desperate. With their network collapsing, they're trying to get the remaining kids out before we close in. Max, lying at Alexandra's feet, let out a low growl. The sound was faint but sharp, a subtle acknowledgement of the tension in the air. What's the plan? Alexandra asked. Reeves adjusted his tie, his exhaustion briefly visible before he masked it with professionalism. We've tracked the shipment to a cargo yard on the outskirts of the city. If we move now, we can intercept them before they disappear. Alexandra knelt beside Rex, her hand resting on his sturdy shoulders. You ready, partner? Rex's tail gave a faint wag, his eyes locked on hers with unwavering focus. He was ready. The cargo yard was a desolate place, rows of rusting shipping containers stacked haphazardly under flickering floodlights. The wind carried the scent of metal and oil, and every creak of the steel structures felt like an unwelcome intruder in the silence. Alexandra moved carefully between the containers, Rex at her side. Reeves and the tactical team followed at a distance, their movements sharp and deliberate. Every shadow felt like a threat, every corner a potential ambush. Rex's nose twitched, and he suddenly froze. His head turned sharply to the left, ears pricked forward. Alexandra followed his gaze to a container with its doors slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from within. She signaled Reeves, who motioned for his team to spread out and surround the container. Rex let out a low growl, his muscles coiling with anticipation. Easy, Rex, Alexandra whispered. We're going in. With a deep breath, Alexandra moved forward, sidearm raised. Rex padded silently beside her, his growl simmering into a low, dangerous rumble. She reached the container doors and with one swift movement, pushed them open. Inside, the harsh glow of a single hanging bulb illuminated the scene. 4 children sat huddled in the corner, their faces pale with fear. Standing over them was a man in an expensive suit, his posture casual but his eyes sharp with cold calculation. Well, well, he said softly, turning to face Alexandra. You're persistent, Officer Morgan. Hands where I can see them, Alexandra barked, her weapon trained on his chest. The man smiled faintly, lifting his hands, but there was no fear in his eyes. Do you really think this ends with me? Do you think stopping me ends this? Rex let out a sharp bark, his body low to the ground, ready to spring at a moment's notice. You're done, Alexandra said through gritted teeth. It ends tonight. The man's smile faltered just slightly. Then I guess this is where we part ways. Before Alexandra could react, he lunged to the side, pulling a hidden switch on the container wall. Alarms blared and the container lights cut out. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed through the cargo yard as tactical teams engaged traffickers emerging from the shadows. Alexandra's heart pounded as she turned back to the man, only to see an open escape hatch in the floor. Rex, go! She shouted. Rex lunged forward, teeth bared, disappearing into the hatch after the fleeing suspect. Alexandra followed, her boots hitting the steel ladder as she descended into darkness. The tunnel below was narrow and damp, barely wide enough to move quickly. Rex was ahead, his growl echoing faintly in the confined space. The suspect's footsteps pounded somewhere ahead, but Rex was gaining ground. Alexandra emerged from the tunnel into a dimly lit underground chamber. Rex had the man pinned to the ground, his teeth inches from the suspect's throat, a deep growl vibrating through his chest. "Call him off," the man gasped, his face contorted in fear. Alexandra stood over him, her weapon still trained on him. "It's over." The sound of approaching tactical boots filled the tunnel behind her. Reeves appeared moments later, his face lit with relief. "Alexandra, you did it," he said, breathing hard. "It's over." Rex released the suspect and stepped back, his tail stiff, his eyes locked on the man as tactical agents moved in to cuff him. The morning sun was rising by the time Alexandra and Rex emerged from the cargo yard. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, a stark contrast to the heavy exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Children were being carried out of containers, wrapped in blankets, and held tightly by medics. Families would be reunited today because of Rex, because of his instincts, and because he never wavered when it mattered most. Alexandra knelt beside her partner, wrapping her arms gently around his neck. Rex leaned into her, his tail wagging faintly. "You did good, Rex," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "You saved them." Rex's amber eyes met hers, and for a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through settled between them. Nearby, Agent Reeves approached, his hands in his pockets. "The network's dismantled. The children are safe. And the guy at the top, he's never seeing daylight again," Reeves said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Alexandra nodded, her hand still resting on Rex's back. "Good." As the sun rose higher in the sky, its warmth cutting through the lingering chill, Alexandra stood with Rex at her side. The day was breaking, and with it came the quiet knowledge that for now, the darkness had been pushed back. But as long as shadows existed, Alexandra and Rex would be there, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The sun hung low on the horizon as Alexandra stood at the edge of the Dallas freight yard, Rex sitting dutifully by her side. The chaos of the past 48 hours had settled into a somber stillness. The traffickers were in custody, the children were safe, and the sprawling network they had uncovered was being methodically dismantled by federal authorities. Yet despite the victory, Alexandra felt an ache deep in her chest, a quiet exhaustion that reached her bones. "Ready to head home, Morgan?" Agent Reeves's voice broke through her thoughts. He approached with 2 coffees in hand, dark circles under his eyes, and a tired but satisfied smile on his face. Alexandra accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "As ready as we can be. Rex deserves a break, and honestly, so do I." Reeves crouched slightly, extending a hand toward Rex, who gave his hand a sniff before giving it a respectful lick. "You know, I've worked with a lot of K-9 teams over the years, but Rex, he's something else." Alexandra glanced down at her partner, the corner of her mouth lifting in a faint smile. "He's not just a partner, Reeves. He's family." Rex's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, and he looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting loyalty, trust, and something that went beyond words. "Go home, Alexandra. You've earned it," Reeves said softly. "We'll take it from here." The drive back to Denver was quiet. The hum of the car engine filled the silence as the highway stretched endlessly ahead. Rex lay stretched across the back seat, his head resting on his paws. His chest rose and fell steadily. But every so often, his eyes would flicker open, checking on Alexandra in the rearview mirror before slipping back into rest. Alexandra's fingers tapped lightly against the steering wheel as she thought about the children, the ones they'd saved, the ones who would be reunited with their families, and the ones whose faces would never leave her mind. But they had done it. Rex had done it. And in a world filled with shadows, they had been a light, however brief, however flickering. The radio crackled faintly with soft country music, and for the first time in days, Alexandra allowed herself to breathe. Her thoughts drifted to her own childhood, to the path that had led her to this moment, to Rex. She hadn't always wanted to be a police officer. Growing up in a small town in Montana, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Animals had always been her refuge, especially after her father left when she was 9. Her mother had worked double shifts at the local diner to keep them afloat, leaving Alexandra often alone with their aging golden retriever, Rusty. It was Rusty who had taught her about unconditional love, about the silent understanding that could exist between species. But life had other plans. When Alexandra was 17, a home invasion had shattered their sense of security. She and her mother had survived, but Rusty, old and arthritic, had tried to protect them and paid with his life. The responding officers had been kind, especially the K9 handler, whose German Shepherd had tracked down the intruder within hours. Something had clicked for Alexandra that day. A realization that she could combine her love for animals with a desire to protect others. Now, 15 years later, here she was, driving back from dismantling a child trafficking ring with her own K9 partner sleeping in the back seat. Life was strange that way, how trauma could reshape a path, how loss could lead to purpose. Back in Denver, the sun was dipping below the skyline as Alexandra pulled into her apartment complex parking lot. She turned off the engine and glanced back at Rex. His ears perked up and his tail thumped gently against the seat. "Come on, buddy, let's go home." Rex hopped out of the car with a grace that belied the exhaustion Alexandra knew he felt. Together, they climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. The moment she unlocked the door, Rex padded in, his nose twitching as he did his customary sweep of the small space. Alexandra dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her boots. Rex had already made himself comfortable on his bed in the corner, his head resting on his oversized stuffed bear, the only toy he'd never managed to tear apart. Alexandra poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen counter. The apartment felt too quiet after days of chaos, the silence pressing in on her ears. But it was a good silence, a peaceful one. She looked at Rex, who was watching her with his ever-present focus, his tail giving one soft wag. "You know," Alexandra said softly, walking over and kneeling beside him, "you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Rex. I hope you know that." Rex lifted his head slightly, pressing his nose against her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more weight than any words ever could. Alexandra's apartment was modest but comfortable. An open floor plan with large windows that offered a view of the city skyline. The decor was minimal, functional rather than decorative, with the exception of the photographs that lined one wall. Images of Rex from puppyhood to the present, of Alexandra at her academy graduation, of the two of them receiving commendations for their work. There were older photos too, faded snapshots of a young Alexandra with Rusty, of her mother smiling in front of their small Montana home, of landscapes that spoke of wide-open spaces in simpler times. As Alexandra prepared a simple dinner, grilled chicken for herself with a portion set aside for Rex as a well-deserved treat, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom. "Hey, Mom," Alexandra answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued cooking. "Alexandra, honey, I just saw the news." Her mother's voice was warm but concerned. "That trafficking ring in Dallas, that was you and Rex, wasn't it?" Alexandra hesitated. Her mother worried enough as it was, and the details of the case were still largely confidential. "We were involved, yes. Are you okay? Is Rex okay?" "We're both fine, Mom. Tired, but fine." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You know, your father would be proud of you." Alexandra's hand stilled over the stove. Her father was rarely mentioned in their conversations. He had left when she was young, disappearing into the wind with vague promises to return that had never materialized. The wound had scabbed over with time, but it had never fully healed. "I don't know about that," Alexandra said quietly. "I do," her mother replied with a certainty that caught Alexandra off guard. "He had his faults. God knows he had his faults. But he always believed in standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. That's what you do every day, honey. That's what you and Rex did for those children." Alexandra swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Rex, sensing her discomfort, had moved to stand beside her, pressing his warm body against her leg in silent support. "Thanks, Mom," she managed finally. "I should go. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" After hanging up, Alexandra finished preparing dinner in thoughtful silence. Her relationship with her father, or rather the absence of one, had shaped her in ways she sometimes failed to acknowledge. The drive to protect, to never abandon those who needed her, to be the steady presence she had longed for as a child. It all stemmed from that early loss. As she sat on the floor beside Rex, Watching him enjoy his chicken with dignified enthusiasm, Alexandra felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Whatever wounds her past held, they had led her here, to this partnership, to this purpose. And for that, at least, she could be thankful. The commendation ceremony was held a week later at the Denver Police Department headquarters. The room was packed with officers, federal agents, families, and a handful of reporters with cameras flashing in the background. Alexandra stood in her formal uniform, the rows of medals on her chest gleaming under the bright lights. But next to her, stealing the show as always, was Rex. His coat had been brushed until it shone, and he wore his own miniature medal on his harness. The chief of police stepped forward, his voice clear and steady as he spoke into the microphone. Today, we honor Officer Alexandra Morgan and her K-9 partner Rex for their extraordinary bravery and dedication. Their actions not only dismantled a dangerous trafficking network, but saved countless innocent lives. Heroes come in many forms, and today we celebrate one officer and one incredible dog who reminded us all of what true courage looks like. Applause filled the room. Alexandra's throat tightened, and she glanced down at Rex, who sat proudly by her side, his ears up, his tail wagging slightly. He seemed to understand the weight of the moment. After the ceremony, Alexandra knelt beside him, threading her fingers through his fur. "They're clapping for you, buddy. You earned it." Rex gave her hand a gentle lick, his tail thumping steadily against the polished floor. Agent Reeves approached, looking almost unrecognizable in a crisp suit, rather than the rumpled attire he'd worn during their days in Dallas. He extended his hand, which Alexandra shook firmly. "Congratulations, Officer Morgan. Well deserved." "Thank you. Any news on the children?" Reeves nodded, his expression softening. "All of them have been identified. Most have been reunited with their families. The others are in protective custody while we ensure safe placements. It's going to be a long road for them, but they're getting the help they need." Alexandra nodded, relief washing over her. "And the network? Completely dismantled. We've made arrests in 6 states, and international authorities are following up on leads in 3 countries. Your work with Rex broke the case wide open." Alexandra glanced down at her partner, who was watching the exchange with attentive eyes. "We were just doing our job." Reeves smiled slightly. "Well, your just doing your job saved a lot of lives?" He hesitated, then added, "The Bureau could use someone like you, you know. Someone with your instincts, your dedication, and Rex, of course." Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job, Agent Reeves?" "Let's call it planting a seed," he replied. "Think about it. You'd be a valuable asset to our human trafficking task force." Before Alexandra could respond, they were interrupted by the chief of police, who wanted to introduce Alexandra to some city officials. Reeves stepped back with a nod. "We'll talk again, Morgan. You and Rex take care." As the reception continued around them, Alexandra found herself watching the interactions with a sense of detachment. The praise, the handshakes, the congratulations. It all felt somewhat hollow compared to the memory of those children's faces when they realized they were finally safe. That was the real reward, not medals or ceremonies. Officer Ramirez approached, a glass of sparkling water in hand. "Quite a turnout for you two," he observed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "How's our hero holding up?" Alexandra glanced down at Rex, who had maintained perfect composure throughout the ceremony, but was now showing subtle signs of fatigue, a slight droop to his ears, a more frequent blinking of his amber eyes. "He's tired," she admitted. "We both are." Ramirez nodded, understanding. "The aftermath is sometimes harder than the mission itself. The adrenaline fades, and you're left with the weight of everything you've seen. Does it get easier?" Alexandra asked, her voice low enough that only Ramirez could hear. The older officer considered this, his weathered face thoughtful. "Not easier, no. But you learn to carry it better. You learn to balance the darkness with the light. The horror of what humans can do to each other with the knowledge that you made a difference, that you brought some justice to an unjust situation." Alexandra nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about the Henderson case, about how different the outcome was this time. You can't save everyone, Alexandra," Ramirez said gently, "but the ones you do save, they matter. They matter immensely." That evening, Alexandra and Rex returned to their favorite spot, a quiet overlook just outside the city. The sun was setting, bathing the sky in hues of orange and gold. Alexandra sat on the hood of her SUV, Rex sitting beside her with his nose lifted slightly into the breeze. The city stretched out below them, distant and glittering. Somewhere out there, families were being reunited. Somewhere out there, children were safe and warm because Rex had barked at a vending machine and refused to walk away. "You know, Rex," Alexandra said softly, her voice carrying in the wind, "sometimes it feels like the world is so dark, like there's just too much of it." Rex turned his head, looking at her with those sharp, understanding amber eyes. "Then there's you," she continued, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You remind me that even in the darkest places, there's still light." Rex let out a soft huff, leaning against her leg as the sun dipped below the horizon. For a moment, everything was still. The weight of the past few weeks, the exhaustion, the fear, all of it faded into the quiet hum of the wind and the steady presence of her partner beside her. The world wasn't perfect, but for now it was enough. And Alexandra knew, as long as Rex was by her side, they could face whatever came next. In the weeks following the Dallas operation, Alexandra and Rex settled back into their routine patrols at Denver International Airport. The vending machines, once innocuous fixtures of the terminal landscape, now carried a sinister undertone for Alexandra. She found herself watching Rex closely whenever they passed one, a part of her always expecting him to stop, to alert, to uncover yet another horror hidden in plain sight. But life at the airport had returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. The regular rhythm of security checks, passenger assistance, and training exercises filled their days. If anything, the other officers treated them with a new level of respect, a subtle acknowledgement of what they had accomplished. One Tuesday morning, as they patrolled Terminal B, Alexandra noticed Rex's ears perk up, his stride becoming more purposeful. She followed his gaze to a small girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, sitting alone on a bench near the gates. There was nothing overtly concerning about the scene. Children traveled with their families all the time. But something in Rex's body language made Alexandra pause. "What is it, buddy?" she murmured. Rex moved toward the child, his approach gentle, none of the alert tension he showed when tracking suspects. The girl looked up as they neared, her eyes widening at the sight of the dog. Alexandra noted the faded bruises on her arms, the wariness in her expression. "Hi there," Alexandra said, keeping her voice light. "This is Rex. He's a police dog, but he's very friendly. Would you like to pet him?" The girl hesitated, then nodded slightly. Rex sat patiently as she reached out a tentative hand to stroke his fur. "What's your name?" Alexandra asked. "Lily," the girl replied softly. "It's nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Officer Morgan. Are you traveling today?" Lily nodded. "I'm going to live with my grandma in Seattle. My mom—" She trailed off, her eyes dropping to her lap. Alexandra felt a familiar tightness in her chest. There was a story here, one that likely involved the kind of darkness she and Rex had been fighting against. "Is someone here with you, Lily?" she asked gently. "My social worker. She went to get us some snacks before the flight." As if on cue, a harried-looking woman approached, carrying a tray of food. She faltered slightly at the sight of Alexandra's uniform, then relaxed when she saw Lily petting Rex. "Officer, I'm sorry. I was just getting her some lunch," she explained quickly. "I'm Patricia Winters from Denver Child Services. We have all the proper documentation for Lily's travel." Alexandra nodded reassuringly. "No problem at all. Rex just wanted to say hello to Lily here." As Patricia settled beside Lily with the food, Alexandra crouched down to the girl's eye level. "Rex and I have to continue our patrol, but it was very nice to meet you, Lily. I hope you have a good flight to Seattle." Lily's hand was still buried in Rex's fur. "Thank you for letting me pet him," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "He makes me feel safe." The simple statement hit Alexandra with unexpected force. "That's his job," she said softly, "making people feel safe." As they continued their patrol, Alexandra glanced back to see Lily watching them go, a small smile on her face. It was a brief encounter, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it reinforced for Alexandra why they did what they did, not just to catch the bad guys, but to create moments of safety, of connection in a world that could be terrifyingly cruel. That evening, as Alexandra prepared dinner in her apartment, her phone rang. It was Agent Reeves. "Morgan, I've been thinking about our conversation at the commendation ceremony," he said without preamble. "The offer to join the Bureau's Human Trafficking Task Force. It's officially on the table now. We need someone with your skills and Rex's nose on our team." Alexandra leaned against her kitchen counter, watching Rex doze in his bed across the room. "I'm flattered, Reeves, but I don't know. Denver PD is home. Rex and I have built a life here." "I understand that," Reeves replied, "but the position would be based in Denver. You'd be part of our regional team, with occasional travel for cases. You wouldn't have to relocate." Alexandra hadn't expected that. She had assumed a federal position would mean moving to Washington, or at least to a larger field office. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "It's a big decision." "Of course, take your time. But Morgan," Reeves paused, his voice losing some of its professional edge. "What you and Rex did in Dallas, that's just the beginning. There are more networks out there, more children who need someone like you fighting for them." After hanging up, Alexandra sat on the floor beside Rex, who had woken at her approach. His eyes, alert and questioning, seemed to ask what was troubling her. "What do you think, buddy? Should we make a change?" she asked, scratching behind his ears. "Join the feds? Take on bigger cases?" Rex tilted his head, his ears perked forward as if genuinely considering the question. "The thing is," Alexandra continued, "I keep thinking about those kids, about how many more might be out there, waiting for someone to find them." She sighed, leaning back against the couch. "But I also think about what Ramirez said, about not being able to save everyone, about learning to carry the weight." Rex shifted, laying his head on her lap, his warm weight a comfort against the chill of her thoughts. "We could do more good with the task force," she reasoned. "Have more resources, more reach, but it would mean more pressure, more responsibility." She looked down at her partner. "What do you say, Rex? Are we up for it?" Rex's response was to lick her hand once, decisively, before settling back with a contented sigh. Alexandra laughed softly. "I'll take that as a yes." 2 days later, Alexandra found herself in Ramirez's office at the K-9 training facility. The older officer listened quietly as she explained Reeves's offer, his weathered face giving nothing away. "So what do you think?" Alexandra asked finally. "Am I crazy to consider it?" Ramirez leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Not crazy, no. But it's not a decision to make lightly. I know, that's why I'm here. You've been doing this longer than anyone I know. You understand what it means to be a K-9 handler, the bond, the responsibility." Ramirez nodded slowly. "The FBI will give you resources we can't match. Access to cases across state lines, federal jurisdiction, specialized training for both you and Rex. From a practical standpoint, it's an opportunity most officers would jump at. But," Alexandra prompted, sensing his reservation, "but it will change you," Ramirez said simply. "The cases you'll see, the depths of human cruelty you'll witness, they leave marks, Alexandra. Invisible ones, but no less real." Alexandra thought of the children in the vending machines, of Lily's bruised arms, of the darkness that seemed to lurk in the shadows of ordinary life. "I've already seen some of that darkness," she said quietly. "Yes, you have, and you've handled it well. But this would be different. It would be constant, relentless. You'd be swimming in it every day." "How do you do it?" Alexandra asked. "How do you face that kind of darkness year after year and not let it consume you?" Ramirez's eyes softened. "You find anchors, things that remind you of the good in the world. For me, it's my family, my garden, the quiet moments with my dogs. For you," he glanced at Rex, who was lying patiently by Alexandra's chair. "Well, you already have one strong anchor, but you might need more." Alexandra nodded, absorbing his words. "Thank you, Michael, for being honest." "Whatever you decide," Ramirez said as she rose to leave, "know that you and Rex have what it takes. You're a team I trust with my life. The FBI would be lucky to have you." The decision weighed on Alexandra as she and Rex completed their patrol at the airport that afternoon. As they walked through the familiar terminals, past the shops and restaurants, and yes, the vending machines, she found herself noticing details she usually overlooked. The family reuniting with tearful hugs near baggage claim. The elderly couple holding hands as they navigated the security line. The young mother soothing a fussy baby with gentle words. These were the moments that balanced the darkness, she realized. The small, ordinary kindnesses, the connections that reminded her why the work mattered. If she joined the task force, she would need to hold on to these moments even more tightly. As they passed through Terminal C, Rex suddenly stopped, his nose twitching. Alexandra tensed, her hand automatically moving to her sidearm. Not again, she thought. But Rex wasn't alerting to danger. Instead, he was looking at a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, who was watching them with undisguised fascination from a nearby seat. "Can I pet your dog, officer?" the boy called out, his eyes wide with hope. Alexandra relaxed, smiling slightly. "That depends. Rex is working right now, but he might be able to take a short break." "What's your name?" "Jackson," the boy replied, straightening in his seat. "Well, Jackson, Rex is a police dog. He's very well trained, but he's not like regular dogs. Would you like to know more about what he does?" Jackson nodded eagerly, and Alexandra led Rex over to where he sat. For the next few minutes, she explained Rex's training, his role in airport security, and the special bond between K9 and Handler. Jackson listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a genuine interest in police work. "Maybe I could be a K9 officer someday," Jackson said as they prepared to leave. "Like you and Rex," Alexandra smiled. "If you work hard and care about helping others, you absolutely could." As they continued their patrol, Alexandra felt something settle within her. The interaction with Jackson, brief as it was, had reminded her of the impact they had beyond just catching criminals. They inspired, they educated, they connected with the community in ways that mattered. That night, Alexandra called Reeves. "I've made my decision," she told him. "Rex and I accept the position with the task force." "Excellent," Reeves replied, the satisfaction evident in his voice. "You won't regret it, Morgan." "One condition," Alexandra added. "We still get to do community outreach. School visits, public demonstrations, the works. It's important to me that Rex and I maintain that connection." There was a brief pause, then Reeves chuckled. "You drive a hard bargain, Morgan. But yes, we can make that happen. The Bureau actually encourages community engagement. Good PR and all that." After hanging up, Alexandra sat beside Rex on the couch, her hand absently stroking his fur as she contemplated the path ahead. It wouldn't be easy. Ramirez was right about the toll such work could take. But she and Rex were ready. They had found their purpose in the darkness, their ability to bring light where it was needed most. "New adventures, buddy," she murmured. Rex looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting the same steadfast loyalty they always had. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The transition to the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force happened quickly. Within 2 weeks, Alexandra and Rex had completed their orientation, received their new credentials, and been assigned their first case. The task force operated out of a nondescript office building in downtown Denver, a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the airport they were used to patrolling. Their new team consisted of 6 agents, including Reeves, each specializing in different aspects of human trafficking investigations. There was Sophia Chen, a forensic accountant who tracked the money trails that funded trafficking operations. Marcus Washington, a former undercover officer with extensive experience infiltrating criminal networks. Eliza Dominguez, a victim advocate who worked directly with rescued individuals. James Park, a tech specialist who monitored online trafficking activities. And now Alexandra and Rex, bringing their unique K9 capabilities to the team. Their first briefing was held in a conference room lined with maps and photographs. Reeves stood at the head of the table, his expression serious as he outlined their target. A suspected trafficking ring operating along the I-70 corridor, moving victims between Denver and St. Louis. "We've identified several truck stops and motels that may be serving as transfer points," Reeves explained, pointing to markers on the map. "What we need now is concrete evidence, something that will hold up in court." Alexandra studied the locations, her mind already calculating how Rex could be utilized. Has anyone actually seen the victims? She asked. Eliza shook her head. We've received reports of suspicious activity, young girls and boys being moved in and out of motel rooms, always accompanied by the same few adults. But by the time local law enforcement responds to calls, they're gone. They're smart, Marcus added. They change vehicles frequently, use burner phones, pay cash, classic counter-surveillance techniques. Alexandra nodded thoughtfully. Rex can track scents across vehicle changes. If we can get him a sample, clothing, bedding, anything the victims have touched, he might be able to follow their trail even after they've switched transportation. Reeves looked intrigued. That could work. We have a confidential informant who's managed to secure an item from one of the motel rooms, a hair clip believed to belong to one of the victims. Would that be enough? Alexandra glanced down at Rex, who sat attentively by her chair. It's not ideal, but Rex has worked with less. When can we get it? The informant is bringing it in tomorrow morning, Reeves replied. We'll move as soon as it's in our possession. The next day found Alexandra and Rex at a rundown motel just off I-70, about an hour east of Denver. The place was all peeling paint and flickering neon, the kind of establishment that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few dusty sedans and a pickup truck with out-of-state plates. Alexandra held the small pink hair clip in a sealed evidence bag, allowing Rex to sniff it thoroughly before they began their search. His training in scent detection was impeccable. Once he locked onto a scent, he could follow it through crowds, across different surfaces, even after rain had washed away any visible traces. Find it, Rex, she commanded softly. Find her. Rex's nose went to work immediately, sniffing the ground in widening circles from where they stood. The task force members watched from unmarked vehicles positioned strategically around the motel, ready to move on Alexandra's signal. After several minutes of methodical searching, Rex's posture changed. His head lifted, ears perked forward, and he began moving with purpose toward one of the motel rooms at the far end of the building. Alexandra followed, her hand resting lightly on her sidearm. As they approached room 118, Rex's behavior intensified. He pawed at the door, letting out a low whine that Alexandra recognized as his alert signal. She touched her radio. We've got something. Room 118. Copy that. Reeves's voice crackled in her earpiece. Stand by for backup. Within moments, the task force converged on the room. Reeves knocked sharply on the door. FBI, open up! Silence, then a scuffling sound from inside. Breach it, Reeves ordered. The door gave way under the battering ram, and the agents poured in, weapons drawn. The room was empty of people, but signs of recent occupation were everywhere. Fast food wrappers, discarded clothing, a smartphone left charging by the bed. They must have just left, Marcus said, holstering his weapon. Check the bathroom. Rex was already moving around the room, his nose working overtime. He stopped at the bed, sniffing intently at the rumpled sheets, then moved to a backpack tucked partially under the nightstand. Alexandra knelt beside him, carefully opening the backpack. Inside were clothes, small, meant for a young girl, along with a toothbrush, a dog-eared paperback, and a worn teddy bear missing one eye. She was here, Alexandra said quietly, recently. James emerged from the bathroom, holding a small plastic bag. Found this in the trash. Looks like receipts from a gas station about 20 miles west of here. Timestamp says 45 minutes ago. Reeves was already on his phone, coordinating with local law enforcement to set up roadblocks. If they're heading west, we might still catch them. Morgan, can Rex track from here? Alexandra looked at her partner, who was still investigating the room, his nose working methodically over every surface. If they left by vehicle, it gets complicated. But if we can get to that gas station, he might pick up the scent again there. The team moved quickly, leaving 2 agents behind to process the motel room for evidence. Alexandra, Rex, Reeves, and Marcus piled into an unmarked SUV and sped toward the gas station. Sirens silent, but lights flashing behind the grill. The station manager confirmed they were there, Reeves said, hanging up his phone as they drove. A man, a woman, and 2 young girls paid cash for gas and snacks, then headed west on I-70. He thought the girls seemed quiet, subdued. Alexandra's jaw tightened. The description matched classic trafficking behavior. Children kept compliant through fear, intimidation, or drugs, Move frequently to prevent anyone from asking too many questions. They reached the gas station in record time. Alexandra led Rex around the property, starting at the pumps and working their way outward. Rex's behavior changed when they reached the edge of the parking lot, where tire marks in the gravel suggested a vehicle had pulled off the main driveway. "He's got something," Alexandra called to the others. Rex was pulling forward now, his nose to the ground, following an invisible trail that led away from the gas station and down a service road that ran parallel to the interstate. The team followed in the SUV, moving slowly to allow Rex to maintain the scent. The service road was poorly maintained, rutted and overgrown in places, clearly not a main thoroughfare. "Where does this lead?" Alexandra asked. Marcus consulted a map on his tablet. "Looks like it connects to a frontage road about a mile ahead, then rejoins the interstate at the next exit." "They're avoiding the main roads," Reeves observed. "Smart. Less chance of being spotted by highway patrol." Rex continued to track steadily, his focus unwavering despite the heat of the day and the rough terrain. After about half a mile, the service road curved around a stand of trees and revealed a small, dilapidated cabin set back from the path. Alexandra signaled for the vehicle to stop. "We need to approach carefully. If they're in there, we don't want to spook them." Reeves nodded, already coordinating additional backup via his radio. "Local sheriff's deputies are 5 minutes out. We'll set up a perimeter and wait for them before moving in." But Rex had other ideas. As they watched, his posture suddenly changed. Ears flat, body low, a growl building in his chest. Alexandra recognized the signs immediately. "Someone's coming out," she whispered. Sure enough, the cabin door opened and a man stepped onto the porch. He was middle-aged, unremarkable in appearance, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. The kind of person who would blend into any crowd. He lit a cigarette, seemingly unaware of their presence. "That's Darren Lewis," Marcus said quietly. "Mid-level operative in the network. Been on our radar for months, but we've never had enough to bring him in." As they watched, a woman joined Lewis on the porch. They spoke briefly, their conversation too distant to overhear, then both went back inside. "No sign of the girl," Alexandra noted, her concern growing. "They could be keeping them inside, or they might have already moved them somewhere else." Reeves made a decision. "We can't wait. Those girls could be in danger. Morgan, you and Rex take the rear. Washington with me at the front. Standard entry protocol." They approached the cabin silently, weapons drawn. Rex moved beside Alexandra, his body tense but controlled, ready to act on her command. They reached the back door just as Reeves and Marcus positioned themselves at the front. "FBI, search warrant!" Reeves's voice boomed as they breached both entrances simultaneously. Chaos erupted inside. Lewis lunged for something, a weapon perhaps, but Marcus tackled him before he could reach it. The woman screamed, backing into a corner. But Alexandra's focus was entirely on Rex, who had darted past the initial confrontation and was pawing frantically at a closed door off the main room. "In here!" Alexandra called, moving quickly to the door. It was locked from the outside, a bad sign. She slid the bolt and pushed it open, Rex at her heels. The small bedroom beyond was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun, but Alexandra could make out two small figures huddled on a mattress in the corner. Girls, perhaps 8 and 10 years old, their eyes wide with fear as they stared at the sudden intrusion. Alexandra holstered her weapon immediately, dropping to a crouch to appear less threatening. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're here to help you. You're safe now." The girls didn't move, their bodies pressed together as if trying to disappear into the wall behind them. Alexandra recognized the signs of trauma, the vacant stares, the defensive postures, the silent terror. "This is Rex," she continued, keeping her voice gentle. "He's a police dog, but he's very friendly. He's the one who found you." Rex, sensing the delicacy of the situation, lowered himself to the ground, his posture non-threatening, tail giving a single slow wag. It was a behavior Alexandra had seen before, his instinctive understanding of when to be a protector and when to be a comforter. The younger girl's eyes fixed on Rex, a flicker of interest breaking through her fear. "Dog?" she whispered, the word barely audible. "Yes, he's a dog," Alexandra confirmed. "Would you like to pet him? He'd like that very much." Slowly, hesitantly, the girl extended a trembling hand. Rex remained perfectly still as her fingers brushed his fur. The simple touch seemed to break something open. The girl's face crumpled, and she began to cry, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Alexandra's heart ached, but she knew this was progress. Emotion breaking through the protective numbness of trauma. "You're going to be okay," she promised. "Both of you. We're going to take you somewhere safe." Behind her, she could hear Reeves and Marcus securing the suspects, reading them their rights. But her focus remained entirely on the girls, on the fragile trust beginning to form between them and Rex. By the time the local deputies arrived, followed shortly by Eliza Dominguez from the task force, Alexandra had managed to learn the girls' names, Mia and Sophie, and establish that they had been taken from a mall in Kansas City 3 days earlier. They were sisters, promised modeling jobs by Lewis and his companion, then drugged and transported across state lines. "Classic recruitment technique," Eliza said grimly as she prepared to accompany the girls to the hospital for medical evaluation. "Target vulnerable kids, promise them opportunities, then move them quickly before anyone realizes they're missing." Alexandra nodded, watching as the girls were gently led to a waiting ambulance. Emergency blankets wrapped around their shoulders. Rex sat beside her, his eyes following the children until they were out of sight. "Good job, buddy," Alexandra murmured, scratching behind his ears. "You found them." Reeves approached, his face showing the mix of satisfaction and sorrow that came with such rescues. "Lewis is talking, trying to cut a deal. Says he can give us names higher up the chain." "Do you believe him?" Alexandra asked. "Maybe. He's scared, and scared people often tell the truth." Reeves glanced at Rex, a rare smile crossing his face. "Your partner made quite an impression on those girls. Dominguez thinks having him present during their interviews might help them open up." Alexandra nodded. "We'll be there, whatever they need." The hospital waiting room was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. Alexandra sat with Rex at her feet, both of them tired but alert. The initial medical examinations of Mia and Sophie had revealed dehydration and minor bruising, but thankfully no signs of sexual assault. Now they were being settled into a secure pediatric unit where they would stay until their parents arrived from Kansas City. Eliza emerged from the unit, her face showing the strain of the day, but also a certain professional satisfaction. "The girls are asking for Rex," she said. "They're still frightened, still processing what happened, but they connected with him. It might help us build rapport if they could see him again." Alexandra stood, Rex rising smoothly beside her. "Of course! Whatever helps them feel safe." The pediatric room was bright and cheerful, designed to put young patients at ease. Mia and Sophie sat side by side on one of the beds, now dressed in clean hospital gowns, their hair washed and combed. They looked younger, without the makeup Lewis had apparently forced them to wear, more like the children they still were. "Look who came to see you," Eliza said gently as Alexandra and Rex entered. Both girls' faces lit up at the sight of the dog. "Rex!" Sophie, the younger one, called out, her voice stronger than it had been at the cabin. Rex approached the bed calmly, his tail wagging in greeting. Alexandra stayed close, monitoring his interactions with the children, but she needn't have worried. Rex seemed to understand exactly what these girls needed: gentle companionship, unconditional acceptance, the simple comfort of his presence. As the girls petted Rex, taking turns stroking his fur and telling him he was a good dog, Alexandra noticed something changing in their demeanor. Their shoulders relaxed, their voices grew more animated, and occasionally one would even smile. It was as if Rex was a bridge, helping them cross from the terror of their ordeal back towards something resembling normalcy. "He found us," Mia said suddenly, looking up at Alexandra. "In that cabin. He knew we were there." Alexandra nodded. "That's his job, finding people who need help." "How did he know?" Sophie asked, her fingers still buried in Rex's fur. "He has a very special nose," Alexandra explained, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "He can smell things that people can't, and he's trained to find people who are lost or hidden." "Like us," Mia said quietly. "Like you," Alexandra confirmed, "and he never gives up until he finds who he's looking for." Sophie looked thoughtful. "Is that why you became a police officer? To find lost people?" The question caught Alexandra off guard with its perceptiveness. "Yes, she said after a moment. That's exactly why. I wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves, to make sure they got home safely. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Are we going home? Really? Yes, Alexandra promised. Your parents are on their way right now. They'll be here soon. The girls exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then Mia spoke again, her voice stronger. We want to tell you what happened, about the man and the woman, and the other places they took us before the cabin. Eliza stepped forward, her professional demeanor tempered with genuine compassion. That would be very helpful, Mia. Very brave of both of you. Would you like Rex to stay while we talk? Both girls nodded emphatically. And so as the sun set outside the hospital windows, Mia and Sophie began to tell their story, their hands never leaving Rex's fur, their voices growing stronger with each detail they shared. Alexandra listened, her heart breaking for what these children had endured, but also swelling with pride for her partner, who had not only found these girls, but was now helping them find their voices, their courage, their path back to healing. The information provided by Mia and Sophie, combined with Lewis's cooperation, led to a series of raids across 3 states over the next 2 weeks. The task force worked around the clock, coordinating with local law enforcement to dismantle what turned out to be a significant trafficking operation. By the end, 17 children had been rescued and 12 suspects arrested, including 2 high-level organizers who had been on the FBI's wanted list for years. Alexandra and Rex were present for many of these operations, their unique skills proving invaluable in locating hidden victims and tracking suspects who attempted to flee. The work was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but each successful rescue reinforced their commitment to the mission. 1 month after the initial rescue of Mia and Sophie, Alexandra found herself back at the Denver K-9 training facility. Rex was running an advanced tracking course, navigating obstacles and following a complex scent trail laid by Ramirez. Alexandra watched from the sidelines, a coffee cup warming her hands against the autumn chill. He's looking good, Ramirez observed, coming to stand beside her as Rex successfully located the hidden training aid. The FBI work isn't slowing him down at all. Alexandra smiled slightly. If anything, it sharpened his skills. The cases we're working on now, they're challenging him in new ways. Ramirez nodded, his eyes following Rex as the dog trotted back to them, training dummy held proudly in his mouth. And what about you? How are you holding up? It was a loaded question, one that made Alexandra pause. The past month had been intense. Long hours, emotional cases, the constant pressure of knowing that lives literally depended on their success. She had seen things that would haunt her dreams for years to come, heard stories from survivors that broke her heart again and again. I'm okay, she said finally. It's hard sometimes, harder than I expected, but also more rewarding. Ramirez studied her face, his experienced eyes missing nothing. You found your purpose, he observed. Both of you have. Alexandra nodded, reaching down to take the training dummy from Rex and reward him with a quick game of tug. We have. It feels right, even when it's difficult. Especially then, maybe. Just remember what I told you about anchors, Ramirez said. Find those moments of light to balance the darkness. They're there if you look for them. As if to emphasize his point, Rex chose that moment to drop the dummy and shake himself vigorously, sending a spray of water from his coat in all directions. Alexandra laughed, shielding her coffee as Ramirez jumped back with a curse. See? Moments of light, Ramirez said dryly, wiping water from his face. Later that evening, Alexandra received a package at her apartment. It was addressed simply to Officer Morgan and Rex, with no return address. Inside was a handmade thank you card, decorated with colorful markers and glitter. The message, written in a child's careful handwriting, read, Dear Officer Morgan and Rex, thank you for finding us and bringing us home. We are doing better now. Mom says we are very brave. I think Rex is the bravest dog in the world. Love, Sophie and Mia. Tucked inside the card was a photograph of the 2 girls smiling broadly, their arms around a golden retriever puppy wearing a blue collar. Look at that, Rex, Alexandra said softly, showing him the photo. They got a dog of their own. Rex sniffed the card, his tail wagging as if he recognized the scents of the girls he had rescued. Alexandra pinned the card to her refrigerator, right at eye level where she would see it every day. It was, she realized, exactly the kind of anchor Ramirez had been talking about. A tangible reminder of why the hard days were worth it, why the darkness was worth facing. As she prepared for bed that night, Alexandra's phone buzzed with a message from Reeves. New case briefing, 0800 tomorrow. Suspected trafficking operation using long-haul trucking routes. Bring Rex. Alexandra sent a quick acknowledgement, then set her phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new darkness to confront. But tonight she would rest. Rex curled at the foot of her bed, both of them gathering strength for whatever lay ahead. The journey they had begun at a vending machine in Denver International Airport had led them here, to a purpose larger than either of them, to a partnership that transcended words, to a mission that mattered profoundly. It wasn't an easy path, but it was theirs, and they would walk it together, step by step, rescue by rescue, bringing light to the darkest corners they could find. As Alexandra drifted toward sleep, she felt Rex shift position, settling more comfortably against her legs. His steady presence was a comfort, a promise, a reminder that even in a world where children could be hidden inside vending machines, there were still those who would never stop searching until they were found. And that perhaps was the greatest light of all.